Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Stacy Gomez. I'm Executive Director with the Center for Migrant Worker Rights, Nova Scotia. And we are a migrant worker support organization which operates throughout Nova Scotia. And we support and work alongside migrant workers in sectors like the agriculture sector, seafood processing sector, and so on. So recently, the Government of Canada announced a number of changes for temporary residents in Canada, including changes for low-waged migrant workers under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. And we have received a number of questions about these changes and workers that are concerned, wondering if these changes apply to them and how this will impact them. So for that reason, we have decided to host this webinar tonight. And we are happy to be joined by immigration lawyer Thiago Buchert. And we'll have a presentation from Thiago, followed by a question and answer period. So we encourage you to send your questions to us by WhatsApp. Our number is +1 902 329 9595. That's the number that's on the screen there. So yeah, with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Thiago.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thiago Buchert. I'm the volunteer counsel for the Center for Migrant Worker Rights in Nova Scotia. My full-time job is as a refugee lawyer with the Halifax Refugee Clinic. And today we're going to be talking about some recent changes to the work permit program in the Canadian work permit program, and also some related changes because it's kind of all around the same idea, as we'll get to. So first off, disclaimer. Although I am a lawyer, what I'm telling you now is not legal advice, which is tailored to your individual situation. This is only legal information. So the information I'm about to tell you is publicly available. I'm just going to condense it into a more readily understandable form, and then we'll answer questions. For another disclaimer, I currently practice almost exclusively in refugee law, which has not been affected so much by these recent changes. I haven't practiced directly in this sort of work permit program that has been affected by the changes. So I'm not as fresh as I used to be. If you do have questions about your own individual situation, I'd recommend you get a lawyer to speak with, and a lawyer who's practiced more recently in the Canadian temporary resident program. Okay. We'll get to questions near the end. Oops, sorry. We'll get to questions near the end. But first, I'd like to talk a bit about the rationale for a lot of these recent changes. Long story short is that due to a number of problems, rightly or wrongly, Canada's cost of living crisis, which I'm sure those of you in Canada are very familiar with, uh, has been blamed on our population growth, and our population growth has been blamed on immigration. Uh, so most chiefly, this is our the chief way the way most people see this is in the housing crisis. The cost of rents is higher than it's ever been. Same with buying houses, but also it's been felt in the healthcare sector where wait times are increasing. And over the past few years, the temporary foreign worker program the temporary resident program in general has been seen as the culprit for this cost of living crisis by many prognosticators and particularly those in the government. The current government, the Liberal government of Justin Trudeau, is extremely unpopular, and they must hold an election sometime within the next 12 months. And so they're clamping down on the temporary resident program in general, broadly, reducing the number of temporary residents in Canada in order to try to abate what they see as the cause of the cost of living crisis, and that's essentially population. So keep that fact in mind. This is about reducing the number of temporary residents in Canada. Almost everything I'm about to talk about. And that's exactly right. So for most of Canada's history, there hasn't really been a temporary residence target. Temporary residence was just kind of seen as something that happens, and the government's focused on permanent residents, people who are going to stay here forever. Temporary residents have just been kind of allowed to come and go, increase and decrease without any quotas, without any targets. That's changed very recently over the past year or so. So the goals of these changes is to reduce the population of temporary residents. And again, when I say temporary residents, that's people visiting, yes, but most importantly for you, that's students and workers. To reduce the population of temporary residents in Canada from 6.5% of the total population, which is the estimated is right now, to 5% of the population within the next 3 years. So it's not just the cost of living crisis. As you know, many of the temporary resident programs in Canada are mainly exist as streaming platforms to take people who are outside of Canada into temporary residence programs that eventually leads to permanent residence. So a lot of people who study in Canada, they don't study because Canadian education is the best in the world. They study because Canadian education puts you on track for permanent residence. A lot of people who work in Canada, they don't work here because of the money. They work because working in Canada can give you permanent residence. So with the increased numbers of temporary residents, that has led to decreased availability for PR track programs. So, for example, with the increased number of students, there's more work, there's more people with postgraduate work permits. And when more people have postgraduate work permits, there's not enough permanent residence quota space for them all to get permanent residence. And that's another reason why the government is trying to reduce temporary resident numbers.
Tiago, I just wanted to mention that the presentation isn't on full screen. Just a heads up.
Thank you for that. I will do that right now. How's that?
Great, great.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'd like to begin. This is a presentation on work permits, but I'd like to just briefly go into limitations on study permits. So they're trying to reduce the number of students. They've already implemented a quota system, a maximum number of study permits that can be allowed. That quota will be reduced by 10% in the coming year, and master's and PhD students who were previously exempt from that quota will be included in the quota, so they will have to be part of that maximum. So decreased numbers of students coming in. The students that do come, will have increased financial requirements. So you'll have to show that you have more money than you previously would have had to. And there'll be increased limits on your ability to work off campus. Um, let's talk a bit about, so now let's talk about work permits. So how the government reduces uh, the number of workers in Canada. Uh, these are the general ways that they reduce the number of workers and the general ideas that are part of these limitations. So first off, they make it just generally harder for people to come to Canada. Visa requirements are increasing, and most recently and most relevant to Canada, they've mandated that Mexico now has a visa requirement when previously people could come on electronic travel authorization, or essentially basically visa free. Uh, they've implemented programs to make it harder to apply for work permits in a few different ways. We'll talk about that. They've limited uh, the ability to obtain work permits through study. So that's limitations on the postgraduate work permit, which is the most important part of that temporary resident to permanent resident stream that I was talking about. The way to make students into permanent residents is through the postgraduate work permit. So they're limiting that and making increasing requirements on that. They are limiting the ability of the spouses of students to work, and that again limits their link to PR. Most importantly for us, they're creating a number of limitations on what are called low-wage labor market impact assessments, or LMIAs. Very recently announced changes have been to the intercompany transfer program, which we'll talk briefly about. This is a work permit that's not an LMIA. That is for that people working in multinational companies, if they want to move to a branch in another country. For example, if you're working for Coca-Cola United States, and you want to work for Coca-Cola Canada, a different corporation in Canada, there's a special work permit track for that. That's been limited. And one thing to keep in mind, though, is that, again, Canada is focusing on cost of living. Areas of Canada, the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, healthcare, the cost of food, things like that. So what that means is, with all these limitations that we're talking about, the government generally has specific exemptions for people working in professions that help address the cost of living crisis. So, for example, if you work in construction, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about doesn't apply to you. If you work in agriculture, again, cost of food, very important. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about doesn't apply to you. If you work in healthcare, same thing. So keep in mind those sector-specific exemptions. All right. So one of the ways they decrease the number of workers is to make it harder to apply for a work permit. As of August 28th, uh, people in Canada who are here as visitors can no longer apply for work permits directly from Canada. So previously, because of COVID, government instituted a policy that allowed people here on visitor status to apply for work permits. The rationale for not having that previously was that people wouldn't go through the proper work permit, work visa process, because they would come as a visitor and then apply from within Canada, and the requirements for a work permit within Canada are maybe less than a work permit from a visa office overseas. So that was already that policy of being able to apply from a work permit from within Canada was already set to expire a few months later. However, they made it expire early so that to again make it harder for people to become workers to reduce that number. They've also limited a process called flag polling. Flag polling is a term which just means applying for a work permit at the border, uh, and essentially you're in Canada, you leave Canada and re-enter at a land border with the United States, and since you're re-entering Canada, you can apply at the border. It was always kind of an unofficial way of doing things, but they are limiting that. So you can no longer go to the border, the U.S. Canadian border, to get your postgraduate work permit, and a lot of ports of entry, Canadian border offices have now resorted to scheduling. So you go there, you don't apply for your work permit, you get a scheduled date where you can return and apply for the work permit. So long story short, just making it harder to apply. Limiting work permits for the spouses of students. It used to be a few years ago that basically if you were in a university studying, your spouse got a work permit, and if they were here, that now doesn't exist for people who are doing bachelor's programs. If you're doing a master's or PhD program, your spouse can work. However, they will be making a change very soon that only those with master's programs that last longer than 16 months can have their spouses working. So again, just making everything a little bit harder, a little bit more difficult, increasing the requirements to limit the number of workers, to limit the number of students. The postgraduate work permit. The biggest change, I think, is that there's now a new language requirement to obtain a postgraduate work permit, when previously that didn't exist. So now you need to take a test, or a language test. If you graduated from a university program, like a bachelor's, master's, PhD, you need to show a Canadian language benchmark score of 7 in order to obtain your postgraduate work permit. A 7 is pretty high. It's enough to it's quite a high level of conversational English or French. If you graduate from a college program, most of those are no longer postgraduate work permit eligible. The ones that are do have a lower language requirement, so you only need to meet a CLB 5, or Canadian Language Benchmark score of 5. It used to be that public colleges, a lot of them you could get postgraduate work permits. However, those have been limited. Again, they're limited, but the main exceptions to that limitation are based on those core areas that are going to help reduce the cost of living crisis. So transportation, healthcare, agriculture and food, a skilled trade like construction trades, and of course, what's called STEM, science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. So these growth areas that Canada wants to promote, again, exemptions carved out. Okay, so now let's talk about our most important topic of today, low-wage LMIAs. So everything I'm going to be talking about with regard to this is not, well, almost everything. It's about the actual labor market impact assessment itself. So a labor market impact assessment is not a visa. It's not a work permit. It is the application an employer submits for permission to hire a foreign worker. Technically, or theoretically speaking, the foreign worker should have almost nothing to do with the LMIA application itself. This is why it is illegal for an employer to charge fees to a foreign worker for the application fees for an LMIA. So this is not the work permit application. This is the thing that gets you the work permit application. So what I'm going to be talking about applies only to what's called low wage LMIAs. So there's two different types of LMIAs: low wage and high wage. Low wage means below the median wage of Nova Scotia, and high wage means above it. And this is this is relevant to your specific province. I included the figure for Nova Scotia here because I practice in Nova Scotia, and we're based out of Nova Scotia. However, this information is available online for all provinces. So in Nova Scotia, if an employer is offering you a job under $24 an hour, it is a low wage LMIA type job, and this applies. This applies. There's three main changes that I'm going to be talking about, and this applies for all types of low wage LMIAs. So includes the Quebec simplified processing, which I have no experience with whatsoever, as well as what's called a dual intent LMIA. A dual intent LMIA is a special type of LMIA that that is kind of intended to be used in a permanent residence application. So that applies to this as well. Okay. The big difference, one big difference, 1 year maximum. It used to be that people applying for low wage LMIAs could obtain 2 years work permits, but now there's only a 1 year maximum. So if you want to have another work permit, you need to apply for it. So that increases the cost, decreases the desirability of this type of work permit. Again, there's an exception. This does not apply to agriculture. The second main change, a big change, is a 10% maximum at the firm. So this means that at most 10% of a company's workforce can be foreign workers. So if a company has 500 people working for it, then that means only 50 of those workers can be foreign workers, and this program will limit the number of foreign workers. There's two exemptions for key sectors that help with the cost of living. So manufacturing, food manufacturing, construction, that's a big one, and healthcare. That maximum is increased to 20%. So in that company of 500 workers, now instead of 50 workers, 100 workers can be foreign workers if it's a construction business or a manufacturing business or whatnot. There's a further exception to those in agriculture, so there's no maximum that applies. There's no cap whatsoever. And the big one, so a refusal to process. An LMIA application can sometimes there are situations where when you submit your LMIA application, they don't touch it. They just return it to you saying, this isn't refused, but we're not going to process it, and you're not getting your LMIA. So we're not going to take your money. It's just like, you can't do this. We're not going to touch it. Nothing's going to happen to it. It doesn't get put in a queue or anything. It just doesn't happen. It's just turned back. It's given back to you. So they do this, and there's a new rule where this applies to low-wage LMIAs if the government finds that it's in basically a city, or what's called a census metropolitan area. In Nova Scotia, this applies only to Halifax and the Halifax Central Metropolitan Area. Around the country, it's pretty much what you would expect. Montreal, Ottawa, big, decent-sized cities. New Brunswick has one in St. John's and Moncton, but in Nova Scotia, it's only Halifax. It applies if the unemployment rate in that census metropolitan area is above 6%. So if it's above 6%, the government will say, okay, we're not processing this LMIA because we're looking at you and where you are, and there's a lot of unemployed Canadians and permanent residents. You should hire one of them. Um, so that's essentially what the idea is. Uh, so if you're in Halifax, be very careful. The unemployment rate is measured by Statistics Canada, and right now in Halifax, our unemployment rate is about around 6%. So some months it's over, some months it's under. Last month, when I started preparing this presentation, the unemployment rate in Halifax was 6.1%. And so if you submitted an LMIA application that was low wage, it would be refused, or not refused, but given back to you and not processed. This month, it's 5.4%. So it's a bit lower, the unemployment rate. So there's fewer unemployed workers, and that means the government will process your LMIA application. Not yours, your employer's LMIA application. So again, this exception does not apply in agriculture, food manufacturing, construction, and healthcare. So those types, again, those exemptions carved out for key sectors. Now, what all this means for you? Everything I just described is about LMIAs. So theoretically, uh, a worker should have very little to do with that application. Um, However, what all this means is it will be more difficult for you to find an LMIA. That's the main takeaway from this. The government is trying to reduce the number of foreign workers, and the way one of the ways they can do that is by reducing the number of LMIAs that allow people to hire foreign workers. Um, so the only reason you would need to know the specifics about what I just talked about is if you had, a relatively small business that was willing to work with you to obtain an LMIA. Keep these facts in mind that even if they want to hire you, they may not be able to. Okay. I just included a picture of the census metropolitan area of Halifax because it's not it's the Halifax regional municipality, but also East Hants. So there's not a lot of I would assume most of you aren't in East Hants, but it's a relatively small part of Nova Scotia. But that's included in the Halifax regional municipality for whatever reason. So keep that in mind. Okay. Now I just want to spend a few brief moments on intercompany transfers. So that's if you're working in a company in a country and they want to transfer you to work at the Canadian branch. Um, there's limitations on here too. So a new requirement is that you now must be operating in not just one but two other countries other than Canada. So that limits a lot of companies that can obtain this type of permit. You must have a physical office in Canada, so it can't just be a co-working space, or you can't be run out of someone's house. And the worker themselves must have more than 2 years of work experience with the company. So again, everything just made a little bit harder to reduce the number of temporary foreign workers. Okay. Um, so I'm just going to back up and talk about a bit about the dates of what I just said. So the limitations on low wage LMIAs came in on September 26th of this year. So what's that? 3 weeks ago. The limitations on intercompany transfers that happened a week and a half ago while I was preparing this talk. So the changes that are happening are coming fast and coming frequent, and all of them pretty much have the same direction. Again, making everything a little bit harder, a little bit more requirements, a little bit more, but less of a cap, less wiggle room. Again, the government wants to reduce the number of foreign workers, so it's going to be harder to find a job and harder to be able to stay in Canada working, unfortunately. So that's pretty much what we're looking at as far as the future. Again, there is that election coming up. The government is trying to reduce the number of foreign workers. If the government wins that election, they may change their minds. If the economic situation changes, they may change their minds. If another political party comes in, they may change their mind. So everything I'm talking about is happening fast and changing very rapidly. So keep that in mind. Um, the future limitations that will happen or that are being talked about, we can talk a bit about that. So there's talked about a fee increase for the LMIA application itself. Um, the government charges employers $1,000 in order to submit an LMIA application. It's been talked about increasing that. Again, that's not something you should know, and that's certainly not something you should pay for, because that is entirely the employer's responsibility. If your employer is trying to ask you to pay for the LMIA application, that's a violation of the program. Um, there's also talk about more inspections uh, to workers who are abusing the program, so that they are less likely to get LMIs in the future. There's talk about increasing the eligibility requirements for the employers, uh, asking employers to produce records if there's been recent layoffs, asking the employer or limiting eligibility in the program uh, to only those employers that have been in business for 1 or 2 years. As of right now, yeah, you can start your own business, start right up, and then immediately submit an LMIA application. That may not be the case in the future. There's talks about limiting work permits for those who are workers themselves, for the spouses of, sorry, limiting work permits for the spouses of workers to those in only in professional and managerial positions, not just skilled, but even more than that, executive, managerial, professional applications. So essentially, the same direction, limitation. And so I'd like to get a little bit of time at the end to talk about the idea of a new non-LMIA agriculture and seafood framework. Um, the government has been half-heartedly pursuing the idea of what's called a sectoral work permit. So the big problem with closed work permits is that everything is dependent on your employer, right? Your ability to remain in Canada, your job, because you can't work for another employer in Canada, right? And then you'll have to get another LMIA, and now those are much harder to come by, as we've discussed. So your employer has a tremendous amount of power over you in the current Canadian closed work permit regime. So one of the ideas the government has been pursuing uh, is the idea of a sectoral work permit. So here's your work permit. You can work with any employer, but only in this one position. So if your employer is causing you problems, you can just move to another employer in the same position, which would reduce the amount of exploitation, hopefully. They've already done this with the caregiver program, which used to be mostly LMIA based. Now it's its own thing that has its own PR track for the caregivers of children and people who need personal care. And there's been talk of essentially doing that with the agricultural stream. So getting rid of LMIAs in general, getting rid of any specific work permit with any specific employer, and just having a person come to Canada and say, here you go, you can be an agricultural worker anywhere. And then they would be free to move to different farms or different processing plants as they wish. Um, uh, that's just an idea right now. We don't have any information on it. We don't know if this is something government will be putting into place before the next election, but something to keep an eye on and something that would be a very good thing in the future. Okay, so that's all I had. Again, there's I went over a lot of specifics, but the main takeaway is that things are becoming harder, uh, and it's just something to watch out for. Work permits will be generally harder to obtain. Um, uh, so yeah, I'm ready for questions.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Thiago. Yeah, really appreciate that overview. And just a reminder, if you have questions about the recent changes that are coming into effect for migrant workers and low wage stream, or any of the changes that Thiago spoke about, please send us your questions on WhatsApp. The number is +1 902 329 9595. 90 +1 902 329 9595. Please send us a message on WhatsApp with any of your questions. And Jackie, if we have any questions, could you post it in the private chat, and then we'll see those questions. All right. I should also mention we were having some technical issues on YouTube. So sorry for anyone who was watching on YouTube, and I know we posted the link to the Facebook live stream, so hopefully you're able to see us there. And this will be stay as a recording on our social media platforms on Facebook, and we'll figure out what was going on with YouTube. So yeah, once again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. So yeah, maybe we'll wait a few moments to see if there's any questions. So I have one question. So under the new rules, under the new immigration rules, can, let me see. Okay, so yeah, I'll read this question and then I'll post an update that we have on the tech side. Under the new rules, will migrant workers be able to use their work permit and process the extension uh, the same throughout the country? Yeah, that's the question that we got. I'm not sure if that's clear. Uh,
Sure. So can you do these apply across the country? Pretty much. Yeah. They apply it from throughout the country, but again, there'll be variations in the unemployment rate throughout the country. So keep an eye on that, and keep an eye about whether or not you're even within a census metropolitan area.
okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. So question, how do you think these changes will impact migrant workers who are already employed? Do you think it will reduce exploitation for the workers?
I hope so. So if you're already employed, uh, nothing changes. Uh, your work permit was given to you, and no work permits will be canceled because of this. No work permits will be affected. So if you got a postgraduate work permit right before those language requirements got in, it doesn't matter. You have a postgraduate work permit. Um, so people who are already employed, their work permits will stay here. Your work permits will remain. Um, uh, the problem comes when you apply to renew that work permit, if you need to. When you apply to renew that work permit, then you'll be under the new rubric, under the new rules. Uh, so it may be that these new rules make it impossible for you to apply for your work permit. So, for example, let's say you work in a business, and before the new 10% maximum cap, your employer had 16% of their workforce as foreign workers. So before that was fine because the cap, I believe, was 20%. Now it's 10%. So your employer will now not be able to keep that 16% of their employers foreign workers. So it will affect you when it comes time to extend or renew your work permits.
Mhm. Thank you. And before proceeding to the next question, I would just mention if people have specific questions about their specific case, as Thiago mentioned, it's best to speak with a lawyer about your specific case. And I would also mention there's a great resource called the Legal Information Society of Nova Scotia. You can send them if you have legal questions. You can send them questions. We'll post a link later, and then they also have a lawyer referral program. So that can be a helpful resource if you want to talk with someone about your specific situation. And I know for tonight, the focus is on providing legal information and not legal advice. So I would just mention that. Great resource. And yeah, next question. So, with the proposed changes that you mentioned regarding agricultural workers moving to different farms, how would that impact I guess, the employers' LMIAs, the owners' LMIAs?
So it's the same thing with work permits. If an employer already has an LMIA, that won't be affected. So if they had a work permit, an LMIA issued under the old rules, and they still have it for whatever reason, they can still issue. You can still get a work permit off of that if it's still valid. Um, so the good news for agricultural workers is that a lot of what I talked about is exempt for agricultural workers because it's one of those key sectors. Anyone who goes grocery shopping can see that food price inflation is a huge issue. So the government wants to make it as easy as possible for employers to hire foreign workers for that sector. Um, so um, the idea of moving between different farms, that will be under essentially the same under the old system. Hopefully, the government will move to a post LMIA framework that will allow agriculture workers to work for different employers in across the country easier, but that hasn't happened yet.
Thank you. Thanks for your responses. And yeah, let's see if there's any other questions. Yeah. And also just to say, yeah, we had to end the YouTube stream just because of the technical issues. So sorry about that, everyone, but we'll see if we can also post it on YouTube afterwards. So yeah, now's your opportunity. If you have any questions, again, please send us a message on WhatsApp. Can we have the number up on the screen again if people have questions?
I just see a note there from Moha Muhammad. That's a specific question to your individual case. However, what I can see, it depends why the work permit was refused. However, you should be aware that to challenge the refusal, if that's something you want to do, the deadline to do so is 15 days after you receive the refusal letter. So if you want to have a lawyer look at it, it's better that you do that in the next few days so that they're able to to launch judicial review if that's something that's appropriate in your situation.
Mhm. Thanks, Thiago. Yeah, that's helpful information. All right, let's see. No, oh, all right, let me see. Okay, okay, no additional questions at the moment. And yeah, I just want to mention, uh, yeah, if you're a migrant worker that is being impacted by these changes, please reach out to our organization. Our WhatsApp number is there, and we're happy to talk to you more about this. So yeah, that's it on my end. Okay, let me see. We have another question. Let me just okay. So the question is, what is meant by low wage and high wage?
Good question. So I'll back that up. So low wage, it's just a price. It's just an hourly wage. So there's two different types of LMIAs, low wage and high wage. Low wage LMIAs are those that are under the middle wage of the province or the median wage of a province. So in Nova Scotia, that's $24 an hour. In other provinces, it'll be higher. So in Ontario, I don't know what it is, but it's probably much higher than $24 an hour. Um, Everything I just talked about only applies to low wage LMIAs. High wage LMIAs are those $24 an hour and over. So the government doesn't have as much of a problem with high wage LMIAs because they figure that those people they're paying a lot for those for a company's paying a lot for those workers, so they must really need them. So they must really need those specific workers. Low wage LMIAs are the ones they're targeting by trying to reduce.
Thank you. So we're getting a few more questions. I know this is not too much on the topic of tonight's presentation, but if you'd like to answer, Thiago, can you talk about the agri-food pilot? Will it continue? Was it successful?
Oh, I'm sorry. I really can't speak to that. I switched to my current position, which is mostly in refugee law. Basically, about a year or two after the agri-food pilot was launched. My understanding, and while I was practicing, and this was 2 years ago, the agri-food pilot it had kind of slow intake. It had a very low quota and had weird requirements. Like there used to be this requirement. I don't know if it still is, but you had to provide a physical high school diploma in order to get accepted into the pilot. I'm sure they would have gotten rid of that now, but so it wasn't popular a few years ago. I have no idea what the situation with it is now, unfortunately.
Thanks, Tiago. And yeah, just a reminder, yeah, if folks have questions about the changes to the for temporary residents, the new changes that were recently announced, let us know. And let me see. Okay, we have another question. Are there low-wage migrant workers working in agriculture?
Yeah. So agriculture is essentially the most important sector for LMIAs. Uh, a huge percentage. I think I don't remember where I heard this, but most I think I heard that most foreign workers in Nova Scotia are in the agricultural and I'm sorry, I think Stacey just said told me this before we went on, but a huge percentage are in agriculture. So hugely important sector
Mhm,
for LMIs.
yes, for sure. For sure. Yes. Yeah, definitely in Nova Scotia, it's a key sector. And yeah, I was mentioning before when we spoke that like over 70% of migrant workers in Nova Scotia are in the agriculture sector or the food processing sector. So yeah, I know that there are some exceptions for workers in these sectors. So we have another question. Are country exceptions for LMIAs as Mexico used to be
Yeah,
because of
we can
trade
talk about that.
agreements?
So there's two different types of temporary foreign workers in Canada. One's on LMIAs and everyone else. Everyone else, there's all sorts of different ways to get a work permit in Canada. For example, if you're a priest, there's a special process for getting a work permit if you're a religious worker, like a priest or rabbi or an imam. If you're a camp counselor, there's a special program for that. If you're an athlete, special program. So one of the special programs are work permits via free trade agreements. Canada has agreements with various countries like Peru, Chile, Korea, that allows them to have a work permit through their own special process with the trade agreement. none of those are affected by what we've been talking about. Those are all that have been set forth by bilateral or multilateral trade agreements, and that's not going to be affected by a desperate liberal government trying to slash temporary foreign worker numbers. So that's much stronger than the law in that. The procedure in that is much stronger than the ones we're talking about, which are much more open to amendments and change. With Mexico and the United States, Canada has an agreement called NAFTA. That Donald Trump changed the name to the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Trade Agreement, or whatever it's called now, but it's the same thing. Nationals of the United States and of Mexico, in certain positions, certain very specific positions, can come to Canada and get work permits. So, for example, if you're a technical writer, I don't remember any of the others. College professor is part of NAFTA. It's a bunch of very specific agreements. Those all still stand.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, Thiago. So maybe I will do some announcements, and then in the meantime, we'll see if there's any other questions. So yeah, I'll just announce that we have a few upcoming events. So we're going to be hosting another webinar similar to tonight's event on the same topic, changes for migrant workers under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. But that one's going to be in Spanish and is going to take place on Monday, October 21st at 7 p.m. Halifax time. So if you have friends who are Spanish speaking and have questions about these recent changes, please share with them. And also, if you're in Nova Scotia, this Sunday, October 20th, from 11 in the morning till 1 p.m., we're hosting a community meal with migrant workers and Nova Scotians in Kentville. So we've posted on our social media channels about these upcoming events. But if you, feel free to reach out to us if you want information about these events. Our number is +1 902 329 9595, and we'll also have transportation support for that community meal. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, I just want to see if there's any additional questions that have come up as we approach the closing of this event. So let's see if there's any final questions. All right, not seeing any additional questions. And also just a reminder, as I mentioned before, if you're a migrant worker in Nova Scotia that's being impacted by these changes, please reach out to us and we can chat further. And our number is +1 902 329 9595. We're on WhatsApp. And yeah, you can always be in touch with us on WhatsApp. So yeah, not seeing any additional questions. So I think then we're gonna close it for tonight and just say thank you so much to Thiago for supporting us tonight with this presentation, and just overall your support in the work that we do is just really appreciated. So yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.